T21 Alchemy. Yeah. T21 Alchemy. It's a T21 Alchemy. T21 Alchemy. It's a T21 Alchemy.
Welcome to the T21 Alchemy Podcast. I'm your host, Oneness Sankara. This podcast was birthed out of my lived experience as a mother to a phenomenal little boy who has T21, aka Down syndrome, and out of my creative journey of turning my experiences and learning into a play. So, welcome to episode 1 of T21 Alchemy series. Each episode sits at the intersection of lived experience, creativity, advocacy, exploring disability, parenting, and inclusion through real life stories and conversations.
What's wrong with your child? Sorry, maybe I heard wrong. What's wrong with your son? Nothing. Nothing's wrong with my son. You know, bite your tongue and breathe. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, right now, I have a choice to make. Educate or annihilate. We stare at each other like two cowgirls at a Beyonce show. I break the silence. His disability. Yeah, his problem. He doesn't have a problem. Fuck it. Annihilate. Look at your face. Look at your clothes. Don't chat to my face.
What you just saw was an extract from my play, T21 Alchemy, which is still in development. And what that scene was speaking to was some of the uninvited negotiations that we don't always give consent to, but sometimes we have to enter into. Sometimes to protect our children that we love vehemently. Hence, at the end of that clip, my character got a bit wicked, but also that we have to deal with some of the ignorance that's out there, and dealing with some of that ignorance is some of my motivation for the play. Let me give you a bit of context about how the play came into being. So as I said, I am a mother of a now 8-year-old who has T21, also known as Down syndrome. I always knew, even since being in the hospital and receiving the diagnosis, which I kind of talk about in play, I knew that there was another story to the story that I was being told at the time. And I knew that I was going to write about that experience, even though I wasn't going to do it at the time because my hands was full with a new baby and a new child, and a child that also had some medical challenges that needed my attention. And just I needed to be in the family way, but you can take the pen out of the writer's hand, but you can't take the writer out of the writer. Or I was going somewhere with this, but you get what I'm saying. I knew that that my creativity was going to meet this new phase of my life and our lives. So over the years, there are bits where maybe I made notes, wrote a bit of a poem, but just didn't have any space and capacity to kind of work with it. And then fast forward to, I think, about 2 years ago, and it felt like it was time for me to do something creative with what I know, or what I'm learning, or the questions that I have. And this is where T21 Alchemy
Podcast is part of a wider creative project exploring disability, inclusion, real, lived experience. Hosted by artist and advocate Oneness Sankara, my mom. The series sits alongside a developing play and research-informed work curated in conversation with SEN families and communities.
And one of the big things for me when I was given my diagnosis with my son is we do that thing, we go on Google, and I couldn't find any black and brown families. I couldn't find anybody that looked like me to sort of give me an idea of what I don't know what life held, what the road ahead held. And I'll be real, what was there even with non-black families was archaic and didn't fill me with a whole bunch of confidence. But I knew in my heart that there were brightness in my future, even though that was not what I was being told. And one of the things that really helped me have perspective was Malcolm. All right. So there's two Malcolms that I really love, right? Stay with me, right? I'm going to land. There are two Malcolms that I really love. One of them is Baba Omawale Malcolm X, or Malik El Haj Shabazz. Malcolm X, right? That's the first Malcolm, right? That's my first Malcolm. The next Malcolm is Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell is a journalist and an author and a prolific thinker. And he wrote about challenging some of our ideas when it comes to how we view talent, success, excellent achievements, milestones, etc. And the basis of what he was saying is that, yes, talent or natural gifts and abilities do account for some of the success story, but actually there are quite a few arbitrary things that are at play as well. And why this was very poignant for me is because one of the things that I was told when given my son's diagnosis was that he would have developmental delays. Now, what I've observed in my own experience and in society is that milestones are a really big thing, right? And we take, I wrote about it in a play, not this play, but in a play that I did before, where the parents were comparing their children, saying, I don't know, my little Johnny, he walked when he was 2 weeks old, and my one used the potty then, and da 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 da. And it's like we equate early development or early milestone as a marker of success, which is something that I don't necessarily think it correlates. So going back to my Malcolm, right, my second Malcolm, Malcolm Gladwell, he uses the example of Canadian ice hockey, I think it is. And basically what he observed was that most of the star players, or at least not most, but maybe like near half of the star players were born between January and March. Now, it could be that Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces are just really good at and cosmically aligned with Canadian ice hockey, or there could be something else at play. What he found out was there was something else at play, and that was the cutoff date. So the cutoff date was the end of December in the year. So, like when they're drafting, when they're picking people to be part of the ice hockey teams and trainings, like for the little, I don't know what they call it, the little leagues, the children, they pick them, right? When they're picking them at quite a young age, maybe 7 or 8 or something like that, a year makes a real difference in development, right? When you're that kind of age. For a typical child, the difference maybe between a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old in physical athletic from that perspective is quite significant. And so what they would find was, because the cutoff date was December, the children that were born maybe in the latter half of the year, especially if you think of the children born in October, November, December, they're nearly like a year younger than those that would be born January, February, and March. Do you get what I'm saying? Am I being clear? So he realized that, oh, actually, it wasn't necessarily that these children were just so, like, showed all of this sort of athletic prowess and potential. It was that literally some of them were a year ahead in development. But because they picked at that time, those were the ones who were strongest at the time, right? That was an example of how something that isn't like innate and ordained by God, or this magical talent and ability, but actually what happens is they drafted them at this age, then they train them, then they get better and better, and that creates a loop, a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, look, I told you these children were brilliant. And then if you transfer it over to like schools, when they pick those who are deemed as gifted and talented, right? And usually those are people who are early achievers. So they're people who are good at tests, or who conduct themselves in a particular way in a classroom environment. Yeah. So they show certain like academic talents, and they show them early on, right? So therefore that early achievement or development is rewarded by being told you are gifted and talented. And not only are you told that you are gifted and talented, you are put into special programs where you are given more resources, more attention, challenged more, invested in more, etc. And then the talent continues, and we've created a self-fulfilling prophecy that has said, look, you are gifted and talented, right? And so what if somebody who was considered as being delayed or behind or a late achiever was given that level of investment? Might things level off? Or even if it doesn't level off, because we don't have to compare ourselves to each other, but might those people achieve something brilliant as well in their own potentiality because they've had that level of investment? Is this landing? Is this landing? Is this landing? And so that made me not panic about the idea of developmental delays, because to me, it didn't feel like, oh, that means that his life isn't going to be good, or he's not going to be able to do A, B, C, D, and E, because we have time, you know? Yes, we have this emphasis on doing things early and but the reality is that there are people who retook their GCSEs and still were successful, did their degree later on in life, like myself, or didn't do a degree at all, or took all sorts of different paths. So I was not as bought into this idea anyway, and that gave me some grace and ease when applying it now to my family and taking some of that pressure off around early achievement. Basically, Malcolm Gladwell was part of me looking at the world in a different way, which was really helpful for our family. But then you realize that not everyone sees the world like that the systems are constructed in a particular way. And it could do with opening up its paradigm around how education, potentiality, especially when it comes to disability. So with disability now, that idea of, you know, with the gifted and talented, then you feed them more, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Having a diagnosis of an additional needs, etc., has the self-fulfilling prophecy, but in the other direction. So it's like you're given a diagnosis, people, educators, others in society look at that as a limitation, like that diagnosis means that you won't achieve, so then you are not invested in. then you are not challenged. People make decisions on your behalf. You start to internalize people's low expectations of you, and then that creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I was like, why should there be, I mean, I'm a black woman, right? So I'm already in this, I've already got skin in this game, right? Why should limitations be placed on people because of how we are perceived as being different from a white hetero male norm? So this has now come up as being very real in my life through witnessing my son and advocating for my son. And this is something that I want to be part of the change. And my tool, my gift is creativity. And so that's how this discourse has made its way into becoming a play and a project, T21 Alchemy. So anyway, this is just the intro episode, right? So I want you to stay with me because this is just the beginning. In the coming episodes, you'll be getting more of the play. So you'll get more extracts of the play. We've got some special guests. As part of this project, I've spoken with many SEND parents and families and people with disabilities. And so you'll be hearing some of that research and where that's landed. We'll be talking about this rich and wonderful community that I'm now part of, exploring topics like community, dignity, and access, and a whole lot more. So if you are a parent, a carer, an educator, an ally, or just simply somebody who wants to see the world be better than it is right now, especially when it comes to inclusion and the centering of the experiences of disabled families, then this is your podcast, and I am your sister in liberation and forward motion. So thank you so much for listening. If you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast or followed it on whatever medium you are digesting this, then please subscribe, please follow, and also share with a friend who might appreciate this vibration. And see you in the next episode.
T21